In this week's episode, we talk about taking time to recognize and appreciate your small victories. We talk about one key message, which is that you are good enough, and we look at progress over perfection. Welcome to Man Quest Define Meaning, where we help men navigate modern life, find their true purpose, and redefine manhood. I'm your host, James, and each week, inspiring guests share their journeys of overcoming fear, embracing vulnerability, and finding success. From experts to everyday heroes, get practical advice and powerful insights. Struggling with career, relationships, or personal growth? We've got you covered. Join us on Man Quest to Find Meaning. Now, let's dive in. Welcome to Man A Quest to Find Meaning, and I'm James, and I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in today's episode. Now, we have just hit 10 live episodes. So literally, I am in double figures. Just wow. To think, before August, I had no idea I'd be doing this. But there we are. So first things first. Last time I spoke to you on a full episode, I talked about celebrating your wins. And so what I want you to do first is I want you to pause the recording and I want you to list 5 to 10 wins that you've had this week. Or even better, 5 to 10 wins you've had today. Because the more that we get into the habit of celebrating our wins, the easier it is to get into the mindset of seeing opportunities around you, of seeing the good, of seeing opportunities to really step into who you want to be. And I'm going to start off with a couple of my wins myself. So the first thing is, obviously, as I mentioned a bit earlier, wow, I've hit 10 live episodes. So all the hard work and the payoff. I'm also putting together some coaching packages which help people to really step into their purpose, to help them to get a direction. So if people are feeling lost, fearful, or struggling, it's helped them to coach them to find out what do they really want to do and what steps they need to take. Also, I've been super consistent with my morning routine, which I'm super chuffed because I'm starting to see results with what I'm doing with my morning routine, with the journaling, the courses that I'm doing every day. And so just by getting up early in the morning and focusing this time on me, I feel great. I feel really amazing. What I want to do now is to have a recap of the last 3 speakers. First up, we had David Heiner. He talks about big goals, ginormous goals. And he talks about how we need to achieve your big goals. We need to be taking action rather than dreaming. It's great to have a dream, but in order to make that dream come into fruition, we need to start taking action. And it starts by taking action by doing the smallest and tiniest steps. He talks about handling setbacks and failures and about failing forward. So learning from your setbacks and continuing to pursue your massive goals despite the challenges. He talks about being surrounded by the right people is critical because these people who are around you are your support system, your accountability partners. He talks about the mindset of top achievers, how top achievers relentlessly pursue their goals, take big risks, and don't let failure define them. And then finally, we looked at what is a healthy man. And he came up with the characteristics of having the ability to express your emotions, of acceptance of insecurities, and being grounded and being authentic in who you are. Next up, we have Roy. And he talked about his addictions and the need for connection. He shared his journey of substance abuse to dealing with sex and porn addiction and recognized that the core issue was his lack of deep connection. We looked at his story into Reiki and how Reiki was the key, the catalyst to his transformation. We also discussed about honoring our boundaries and how reparenting your inner child helped to deal with long lost wounds. We looked at vulnerability and emotional expression, how the importance of embracing vulnerability and finding safe space helps you to express emotions like sadness, guilt, and shame. And this is his part of his journey to becoming a more healthier man. Finally, we have Haroon. And he talked about his amazing, incredible transformational journey and how he, in his very early childhood, was subject to racism, how racism propelled him to become the man he is today. He talked about how he joined a martial arts school of his own free will, and through doing martial arts, he learned a lot about discipline, he learned a lot about practice and patience, and he talks about how connecting your work to a larger purpose can have a massive impact, and how discipline and routine, both in physical activities and spiritual practices, can have a massive change in your life. He talks about service and humility and the impact through having experiences. This now leads on quite nicely to the next section, which is looking at what's been going on for me. And today, I wanted to talk about a few key messages which have been coming up for myself. And the first one is just get started. That is the one key message that I can give you today, is just to get started. There's things in my life that I have put off and put off and put off. And when you keep putting these things that you want to do off, you never get started. You never, ever make any progress with them. And the one example that I can talk about here now in this moment is how there's certain episodes where I'm recording by myself like this that I keep putting off and putting off. And the main reason I keep putting off is because maybe I haven't got anything to talk about. Maybe I can't do it. Or maybe I think to myself that I'm not good enough to do my own episode. But I know I am, because I'm doing it now. And I've had to learn a really hard lesson here, that I can do all these things that I think I can do. But maybe some of these things that I think I can't do, are just too big a goal for me at this moment in time. So rather than having this big, massive goal, break it down into tiny, achievable chunks. And so what I do with this episode, while I find my feet, is I just do it in small sections. I'll break this episode down into the beginning parts, the introduction, the talking about my celebrations. Then I'll talk about into the different talks that I did, different podcast episodes. Then I talk about what's going on for me. And this makes it easy to do. Plus, because I'm using a program called Descript, I can do it this way. You know, I haven't got to think, okay, I've got to do a 25-minute session, let's let it roll. And maybe in the future, when I start to be able to adjust to this kind of thing, maybe just maybe I might do a 25-minute, 30-minute session like that. But at this moment in time, I'm breaking it down. And this goes for anything. It could be looking for a new job. It could be starting a business. It could be looking for a relationship. It could be anything. It could be anything. All it requires you to do is to break it down. So it's about creating a plan. Break it down, creating a plan, and actioning one tiny step on this plan. I'm asking you now, the audience, what is it that you can start today? Could you just start a plan of this bigger goal? And what action steps could you create? And what action steps could you, in this moment, action now? While I'm talking about this, I want to quickly mention that my recordings are nowhere near perfect. And that is okay. Because just by me doing this and getting started, I can learn how to make it better, how to make it more clearer, how to adjust the sounds so that it's all the same rather than up and down within my episodes, how to make it really crystal clear, how to make the gaps between sentences perfect, how to make sure that I take out all the ums and ahs, to be able to adjust different sections. These are all things to be improved on. But the key thing is about getting started first. And these two key things lead on quite nicely to the next message, which is you are good enough. Let me repeat that. You are good enough. You are good enough to achieve whatever you want. It is our mind which plays funny stories saying that we aren't good enough, but we are good enough. We're good enough to achieve whatever we want, whether it's in business, whether it's work, relationships, finances. You've just got to be the one willing to do the work, to take the steps, as we mentioned a minute ago. You are good enough, and you can achieve anything that you set your mind to. I've had many stories in my life where I have felt not good enough to achieve anything. I felt not good enough to be a speaker, not good enough to be a PT, not good enough to have my own business. But I've come to learn that I am good enough, and everybody is good enough to do whatever they want to do. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's that you can do it and you are good enough. All it requires is your will to do it and then doing it, which sounds a lot simpler than it actually is. But if you create a plan and you action that plan and take the steps regardless, you will get there. It might take time and a lot of patience, but you will get there. For the next 3 weeks, we got 3 incredible guests. We've got Nigel Fardy, aka Mr. Frostbite, who's a mountaineer, and he was caught on Mount McKinley, and he talks about his great survival story. Next up, we've got Lawrence Johns, who is one of the lead Mankind Project people in Great Britain. Then we've got Brad Carr, who is an artist and photographer, and he talks about his journey to creating some absolutely incredible art. I would like to thank the listeners for tuning in. And remember, if you have any feedback or any reviews, I would love to hear. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.